Preds Nation, Johnny here again. So, you ready for more pain? Because you came to the right spot. After delivering to you the most heartbreaking regular season losses in franchise history, as promised, I have compiled the most heartbreaking playoff losses in franchise history. In case you missed the last one for regular season losses, you can go back and watch it. That was a top 25. This time, I wanted to focus on the real pain, the real heartbreak of longtime fans, or maybe just since this team got better in 2014-2015, that pain. So this list will be reduced to 10 to focus on the real heartbreak. On this list, you will find losses in the first round and, of course, losses in the Stanley Cup final. You will also see losses in overtime, losses that ended a series, and blowout losses. But as long as you're always learning something from the loss, player or fan, it will never really kill you in the end, right? FYI, just to let you know ahead of time, losses in a bubble will not make this list because that was a once-in-a-lifetime occurrence and there were no fans at those games. Also, I decided not to include a playoff sweep, the only one in franchise history to boot, because I didn't think it was fair to examine a playoff series loss where the #1 netminder had been knocked out at the end of the season going into said playoffs. That aside, grab the tissues if you must and enjoy this painful walk down memory lane. Number 10. May 27th, 2021 versus the Carolina Hurricanes. The Preds made the playoffs on a hot streak carried by their goalie in a shortened 56-game season coming out of a worldwide shutdown with almost full capacity fans in their building for the first time in 2 years. The Preds were down 3-2 in the series coming into this Game 6, but the series seemed winnable because Games 3, 4, and 5 had all been decided in overtime, while also the home team held serve through the first 5 games of the series. And if you remember, the Preds had a 3-1 lead in Game 6 with 7 minutes left to go in the second period. Game 7 certainly seemed within reach, but unfortunately, shortly thereafter, the Preds lost Roman Josi for the game, their best defenseman, and ultimately the Carolina Hurricanes rallied and tied the game at 3. Barely a minute into overtime, Sebastian Aho dashed all the Preds' remaining hopes with the winning goal past UC Saros, ending the series in 6 games. Hurricanes won 4-2, and for the 3rd straight season, the Preds' playoff drive ended with a walk-off overtime winner. Number 9. May 3rd, 2011 versus the Vancouver Canucks. This was the first time in Preds playoff history that they were playing second round games, much less the fact that they were playing games in the month of May. They had done the right things through the first 2 games in Vancouver. They had only allowed 2 goals through 2+ games. Game 2, of course, going to overtime, and they had gotten a split. In Game 3, the Preds did the right things by scoring first, and though they trailed in the 3rd period, Joel Ward would bring the Preds back into it and tie this game at 2, and it headed to overtime. Could the Preds maintain home ice advantage and get that all-crucial 2-1 series lead after 3 games of the series? Well, it wasn't to be, as just over halfway through the first overtime, Ryan Kesler and Shea Weber got into a tussle battle for the loose puck. And yes, I will admit, Shea Weber should have and did go off for hooking, but sneaky little Ryan Kesler with the chicken wing of holding Shea Weber's stick. He should have gone off as well, but the refs totally missed that, and the Canucks got the crucial power play. And sure enough, 40-something seconds later, the man who should have been in his box right beside Shea Weber, he's the one that ends it, giving the Canucks the 3-2 victory in the game, the crucial, pivotal 2-1 series lead. This game was heartbreaking, so it made the list, but it is lower in the list because it was only Game 3 and the Preds still had time to overcome it. Ultimately, would not, in the end, losing this playoff series to the eventual Cup runners-up, the Vancouver Canucks, 4-2. Number 8. May 29th, 2017 versus the Pittsburgh Penguins. Wow, what a moment. The Preds were playing in their first Stanley Cup final game in nearly 20 years of being an existing NHL franchise. The kids on this team were untested and certainly weren't totally aware of what laid in store for them in this series. It would certainly show itself because the Preds found themselves down 3-0 after the first period, but Peter Laviolette believed in his team and he stayed with Pekka Rinne in net throughout the rest of the game. But the Preds roster rewarded their coach for believing in them, and you had Ryan Ellis score in the second period, and then Colton Sissons and Frederick Gaudreau in the third, and with about 6 minutes left to go in regulation, this game is tied all back up at 3. But just over 3 minutes later, Jake Guentzel would get the Pens the lead back, and future Pred Nick Bonino would score his second of the game. The Preds would fall short in Game 1, losing the game 5-3. I will not talk about the series because, of course, there's still a game left from the series to talk about. You just have to wait and see what number it's going to fall on. Number 7. April 15th, 2015 versus the Chicago Blackhawks. Better prepare yourself for this team to be mentioned on this list quite a bit. The Preds had just finished their first regular season under new head coach Peter Laviolette after taking over from the coach this franchise only knew up to this point, the players and the fan base, Barry Trotz. The team during this regular season had played a lot of hot stretches, were performing beyond expectations, at one point were leading the league, leading the conference, and also at one point leading the division, but now found themselves in the second hole with home ice advantage over division rival Chicago. But perhaps this was a sign of what was to come that spring as the Preds endured a 6-game losing streak heading into the playoffs. Preds playing the Blackhawks for the first time in 5 seasons. There were pieces of this team that were on the roster in 2010, also in 2015. Maybe they had learned something. Maybe they knew how to beat this team this time. And through 20 minutes, it did look like maybe things had changed as the Preds found themselves up 3-0 after that first period, including a Colin Wilson power play goal, while Kimmo Timonen, yes, that former Pred Kimmo Timonen, sat in the box for holding. But it was all Blackhawks in that second period, if you remember, with the Blackhawks scoring 3 unanswered goals included by Patrick Sharp and later Jonathan Toews, and this game was all knotted at 3 after 40 minutes. No scoring in the third period, and despite the Preds having a power play chance in overtime, Duncan Keith completed the Blackhawks' stunning comeback, stunning the Bridgestone faithful, scoring past Pekka Rinne, giving the Blackhawks a 4-3 opening series win. The Blackhawks stole home ice advantage, the advantage that they would not give back to the Preds as they would eventually lose in a series. But there's still one more game from this series to talk about, so let's not focus on how many games it ended on just yet. Number 6. May 1st, 2018 at the Winnipeg Jets. Now, for those of you who remember that season that the Preds, after losing in the Stanley Cup Final, won the President's Trophy and may remember that this series against the Jets went to 7 games, you might be thinking, oh, Johnny, why didn't you talk about the heartbreak at home? If you remember, Game 5 and Game 7 were blowout losses at Bridgestone Arena. Nothing really heartbreaking about it. No, this series turned in Game 3. The Preds, as you remember, lost Game 1 at home to the Jets, but rallied and got the home split. Heaven forbid they had been trailing 2-0 with that double overtime win with the goal by Kevin Fiala. So they thought, hey, maybe momentum was on their side. And through the first period, momentum did look on their side because they staked out in front of the Jets with a 3-0 lead. But playing in a Bell MTS Center, as it was called at the time, is not for the faint of heart because the Jets rallied for 4. Yes, you heard me right. 1, 2, 3, 4 unanswered goals in the second period, and the Jets all of a sudden were out 3 in front of the Preds. Early in the third period, Philip Forsberg would tie the game at 4, but then 3 unanswered goals, including an empty netter, including 2 goals by Blake Wheeler, would give the Jets, oh my God, I can't believe I'm talking about 7-4, giving the Jets back the series lead, the lead that they may have ended up tied through 4 through 6 against the Preds, but the lead they would not let the Preds grab back. As we all know, the Preds would lose unconvincingly to the Jets in 7 games. Number 5. April 21st, 2015, at the Chicago Blackhawks. I warned you that there was going to be quite a few mentions of the Blackhawks in this countdown. Now, making this list, I went over and over in my head from that 2015 first round series against the Blackhawks, what was more critical, what was more heartbreaking to rank higher. I ultimately went with Game 4 from the series over Game 1 because Game 4 was much more pivotal, as we all know. The Preds, playing in the friendly confines of the United Center, had 2 leads in this game. They were up 1-0, and then later were up 2-1 through 40 minutes. Could they usher this home and get a split so they could go back home with a best 2 out of 3 ahead with 2 games in Nashville? No, of course they could not, as Brandon Saad tied this game at 2 with about 9 minutes left to go in regulation, sending it into a crucial overtime. First overtime, nobody scored. Second overtime, despite 2 power play chances for the Blackhawks and 1 for the Preds, nobody scored, and then we're off to overtime. When would this game end? I'll tell you when it ended. Only 1 minute into the third overtime, as Brent Seabrook got set up, and despite a combined effort by the duo of Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews of 1 assist in that game, the Preds couldn't do better than the 2 goals, lost 3-2 in triple overtime, and found themselves down 3-1 in the series. And despite a heroic effort of a hat trick, his first career playoff hat trick by Philip Forsberg in Game 5, would ultimately lose this back in United Center in Game 6, 4-2. Number 4. April 28th, 2024 versus the Vancouver Canucks. Yep, Preds Nation, we're going to talk about it. I don't care if it's fresh wounds from this last spring. What, barely 2 months ago? Yeah. We're going to talk about it. What a made-for movie the script was through 3 games in the series coming into Game 4. Preds blew Game 1 and lost to Thatcher Demko. But after Game 1, it would turn out that Thatcher Demko would be out for the series against the Preds and ultimately the playoffs for the Canucks, but not due to any fault of a Preds player in Game 1. The Canucks would then call upon backup Casey DeSmith, and the Preds would get the all-crucial split in Game 2, going home with a 1-1 split in the series, and Casey DeSmith played in Game 3, and despite the Preds' best efforts to massively outshoot the Canucks, they would lose and be down 2-1 heading into Game 4. Well, guess what? It gets better, because then Casey DeSmith gets hurt, and the Canucks are forced to call upon Arturs Silovs, their third-string goalie, their starting goalie of their AHL affiliate, the Abbotsford Canucks. He would come in really cold, untested for Game 4. Massively outshoot the Canucks in this game, are up 3-1, not even 15 seconds into the third period, should be home and cold to tie the series at 2, getting momentum. The Canucks goalie would hopefully have the Preds in his head because he's the third-string goalie. That series should be tied at 2, right? Keyword, should be. What is about to commence near the end of this game is the worst 3 minutes of my life. Sports-wise, of course, not personal. Sports-wise, worst 3 minutes of my life. Maybe 1 yard short of Super Bowl 34 can make a comparison. But anyway, focusing on the countdown. Arturs Silovs on the bench Canucks with the extra attacker, under 3 minutes left to go in regulation. For some reason, Brock Besser is wide open for a setup one-timer who beats Saros. Now the Preds lead is down to 3-2. Okay, it's still manageable. Preds just have to learn to lock this down and get the series split at 2. Then late in the game, Gustav Nyquist cannot defend Quinn Hughes well, who gets the puck in down low. Somehow, 1, 2, 3, 4 Canucks get behind the Preds defensive line, and Saros is at their mercy. And 8 seconds left to go. 8 seconds left to go in regulation. Oh, bringing up so much pain again. Brock Besser ties the game at 3. The Preds had certain victory, and the Canucks have come all the way back. This team will not die. I'm okay. And let me not forget that Colton Sissons, though I don't ultimately blame him because it wasn't on his shooting hand, he could have put this game away 4-1, but he couldn't get his backhand to go right with the Canucks' empty net. And you know the rest of the story because Elias Lindholm scores in overtime, not even a minute in, and the Canucks steal victory from the jaws of defeat and go back home with a 3-1 series lead. And if you want an even longer talk about this, feel free to go into the channel videos and watch my Preds fan reaction from Game 4. We all know the sting of this game is going to live with us for a long time. Number 3. April 22nd, 2019 at the Dallas Stars. This one is the first of 3 playoff goals scored against the Preds in their playoff franchise history that you could not pay me to watch. Maybe I'll consider reliving the pain visually when the Preds finally hoist Lord Stanley's mug. But not now. In fact, only my closest friends know this. This overtime, I couldn't even watch because I was so disgusted with this team. I only heard John Klingberg's goal audibly as it beat Pekka Rinne to end the Preds season that year. I was so disgusted with this team's dreadful power play in this series, capped off when it went 0 for 15 with a last minute in the third period of this game. The refs were like feeling charitable. Hey, see if you can force this back to Nashville with the last 2 minutes of the third being on the power play. No, of course not. Why did you think the Preds would finally score on a power play then? Losing this series in 6 games, 4 games to 2, was definitely the coming of the end of the core of this team that had been left together for a little bit too long after the Stanley Cup final loss, the President's Trophy season, and losing to Winnipeg. Yeah, after this series, it was time for a change. And one man who ultimately would leave a little bit later, and we all miss him, was the heart and soul of this team because he felt like a fan on the roster with his lunch bail type work ethic and attitude, was how I remember Craig Smith dealt with this during a Walker cleanout. Number 2. April 24th, 2010 at the Chicago Blackhawks. I'm pretty sure even some 14 years later after this game that there's still a debate amongst Preds Nation about which 2 games and how they should be ranked are the most painful in Preds franchise history, at least according to the fans. I swear every mid-March to early April every year, I wake up in cold sweats thinking about this game. Feel free to skip ahead if you must, because I understand that this cut from this game is really deep and may trigger PTSD for some in the fan base. If you're still here and haven't skipped ahead, welcome if you've never experienced or relived just how brutal this loss was. That Saturday afternoon for this game, remember it was a Saturday afternoon game, was one hell of a roller coaster ride. The Preds had opened the scoring on a goal by David Legwand, but the Preds then found themselves down 2-1 after 2 and then 3-1 in the third until 4 minutes left to go in the second period. Joel Ward would score, narrowing the Blackhawks lead to 3-2, setting up what would be one hell of a third period. Some of us like to refer to that third period as Martin Erat going from hero to absolute GOAT. And not the good GOAT. Like, GOAT, get the hell out of here. What the hell are you doing? Martin Erat would tie the game at 3, 90 seconds into the third. And then some 9 minutes left to go in regulation. He gave the Preds a 4-3 lead. Were the Preds really going to do it? Were they going to get a 3-2 series lead coming home to Nashville with a chance to close out the Blackhawks? Time tick, tick, tick down. Were the Preds going to do this? Were the Preds going to do this? And then with like a minute left to go in regulation, for some reason, Marian Hossa viciously shoves Dan Hamhuis into the board. I can't remember if he left the game injured. I couldn't find that out. You can let me know. But on the play, for some reason, the refs give a 5-minute major, and that's it. Attempt to injure. Hello? Marian Hossa is sent off to the box for the 5 minutes. Preds would go on the power play for the remainder of the game. But yes, I'm ticked off that Marian Hossa wasn't tossed, but this has got to be okay, right? Maybe the refs screwed up and the officials at league office can fix this by suspending him after the game. The Preds are up 4-3 with a minute left to go in regulation. A power play to basically kill off the remainder of the game. This should be okay, right? The Preds maintain possession on the power play in the Blackhawks. And the puck comes behind Antti Niemi, right? He was the one in net for the Blackhawks that spring, and Martin Erat has the puck behind the net. And instead of just keeping it down in that end of the ice to kill off the clock, maybe if a defender comes at him, pin on the boards, milk more time off the clock, Martin Erat, for some reason, backhands it, not even looking where he's going, into the slot. Blackhawks take over, go the other way, and with 14 seconds left, the Preds were 14 seconds left away from going home up 3-2 in the series. Patrick Kane ties this game at 4, shorthanded. And then many of us, me included, had this bad feeling. It's like, they're really, even with a long power play going into overtime, they're really going to let this one slip away. Yep. And then in overtime, the Preds couldn't score on the remaining power play advantage that they had. And serves them right, because the man who should have been tossed from the game comes out of the penalty box, and not even 10 seconds later gets sent up by Brent Sopel. Marian Hossa, who should not have even been on the ice at all in overtime, ends it. And the Blackhawks are the ones with a 3-2 series lead going back to Nashville, where they would ultimately put the Preds out of their misery. Real heartbreak, winning the series 4-2. Honorable mentions. There was Game 1 against San Jose in 2007, where they had a 50-plus win team during the regular season, but lost Game 1 and ultimately lost to San Jose in 5 games that playoff run. There was Game 5 versus the Detroit Red Wings in 2008. Yeah, they were certainly outmatched. Payrolls exponentially different. But after 4 games, the Preds were tied at 2 apiece in that series, including that miracle comeback victory with goals 9 seconds apart in Game 3, was it? And then they won Game 4, and then they tied it late in Game 5, 1-1 on a goal by Radek Bonk of all people, before losing soon in overtime on a breakaway. There was the game in 2012 against Arizona, where they played terrible, thanks to 2 people who shall not be named who broke curfew and were ultimately punished for it. And I never want to see them at any alumni event unless they profusely apologize for their behavior that spring in Glendale. May 12th, 2016. I remember that one vividly. Game 7 against San Jose. The Sharks and the Preds throughout that second round series had held serve at home. Maybe the Preds in their second straight Game 7 of the same playoff run could make an effort of it. Nope, Preds got blown out 5-0. Shea Weber in his last game as a Nashville Predator before being traded to Montreal for PK Subban and Roman Josi were a combined -6. And then another game from 2024, this last spring for the Preds. Game 6 against Vancouver, where they were in a scoreless draw, and many of us thought as this game got closer and closer to possible overtime in a scoreless draw, Will this game go to overtime? Where have I seen a scoreless draw late at home before? Oh yes, our number one game on this countdown. Number one. June 11th, 2017 versus the Pittsburgh Penguins. Need I say more? I know some of you may have thought that the Chicago loss should have been number one, but really, that close to finally giving this fan base and this team a much-deserved Stanley Cup championship and title. And falling that short, of course this had to be number one. That night at 501 Broadway was something else. Through the first 5 games, the home team had held serve, though the Preds did struggle through 3 games in Pittsburgh. The Preds had control through games 3 and 4 back in Nashville. Preds Nation remained hopeful that despite Game 5 6-0 blowout, that the Preds just needed a small victory. Just give them this and they'd be happy with whatever happens in Pittsburgh in Game 7. Just give them a chance. And just over a minute into the second period, the Preds looked like they had that chance because a loose puck laid in the blue paint as Matt Murray was down, and Colton Sissons goes for a loose puck and knocks it in. The goal horn should sound. You should hear Tim McGraw's, I like it, I love it, but it's play whistle down, no goal. Kevin Pollock explains that he lost sight of the puck. How do you lose sight of the puck that quick and blow it down? How do you not have some sort of conversation with Dan O'Halloran and the other ref who should be in position to see that the puck was in play and the Preds should have a 1-0 lead? That is the biggest robbery I have ever seen since Gretzky should have gone off for high sticking and causing blood on Doug Gilmour in the 93 playoffs. But unfortunately, we play on scoreless, and it's scoreless through 40 minutes. Now Preds fans are getting a little bit nervous. Preds power play through 40 minutes could do nothing. 0 for 2 to that point, and it had a 32-second 5-on-3 in the third period and could do nothing. This game looked bound for overtime as we got closer and closer to 60 minutes of regulation. And at this point, I must warn the parents out there, if there are small children in the room, please pause the video and send them away, as I don't want to scar them for life from wanting to be a Preds fan until the day they die. This might set them up badly. Okay, I'll continue. Under 2 minutes now. And then 95 seconds left to go in regulation. Play in the Preds zone. And of all people, did it really have to be? I would have been pissed off, but I could have accepted it if it was number 87 of the Penguins. No, it was Mr. Irrelevant, as he got the nickname for being the last player drafted in this draft class. Former Nashville Predator Patrick Hornquist would beat Pekka, finally breaking the ice and giving the Preds that all-important 1-0 lead. Carl Hagelin would put this baby to bed, scoring the empty netter with 15 seconds left to go in regulation, giving the Pens the 2-0 victory, the 4-2 playoff series win. The Penguins got their back-to-back Stanley Cup titles and got to parade around Lord Stanley's mug on Bridgestone Arena ice. Perhaps one day, Preds Nation, hopefully within my lifetime, your lifetime, we'll get to see this team parade around their own Stanley Cup victory on Bridgestone Arena ice. Heck, I'll even take a parading around on a road team. I'm not that picky. So Preds Nation, I hope you enjoyed another walk down memory lane. Not always the most positive, but heck, as long as you learn from the pain, make yourself better so it doesn't happen again. It's living the moment that's what is important. I'm not going to update this list every year. I just thought it important to do the regular season one and this playoff one, seeing as it has been 25 years of existence for this team. So that's a wrap for this video. Thank you very much for watching this video. As always, click a like if you like this video. Click subscribe if you really like it. You can find my social media and interact with me during the Preds offseason or during the season, during games, by clicking on a channel name. Tell all your friends about Redemption. And heck, it's less than a week away. Stay tuned to this channel for content about the upcoming NHL draft and free agency as we see how Barry Trotz works to mold this team for next season.